Thank you. That's about right distance from that there, I think. Okay. So yeah, thank you and well done for organising this conference today. I think that's a fantastic achievement on its own. Trying to rally people together and do this from scratch as you've done is really impressive. So I'm a gastroenterologist, and I have a clinic at my local hospital called the Family History of Bowel Cancer Clinic. My background is in cancer genetics, I suppose. I did my research in cancer genetics, and throughout my training, wherever I worked in Ireland, in Wales, in London, you could see that people with Lynch syndrome haven't been following a clear clinical pathway from before diagnosis, screening, through cancer diagnosis, and subsequently. And as a trainee, when I raised my hand and said, I think maybe we should think about Lynch syndrome here, people always said, oh no, somebody else will do that, don't worry about that. So now I can do it, I'm doing it, and nobody can stop me. Anyway, okay. So I'm going to talk about bowel cancer in the context of bowel cancer in the United Kingdom, why people get bowel cancer, how it happens, what we can do to prevent it, when we identify Lynch syndrome, then how we manage it as a multidisciplinary team. So I'm sure that most of you are pretty well read, but just in case, this is a large bowel here, colon, and the last 20 centimeters is the rectum, and the small bowel above here. I'm mostly focusing on this. I know there are lots of other cancers that you're interested in, but that's the title of my talk, so I can get away without talking about them. There are about 35,000 cases of bowel cancer annually. That should be in England, not the UK. I think there's about 47,000 across the UK. And survival, most people do survive bowel cancer, fortunately. However, survival in the UK is lower than in other countries, such as Australia, Canada, or Poland. And it's estimated that if our survival for bowel cancer was increased from 54% up to mid-60s in the UK, then 1,700 lives could be saved annually. Part of this is identifying cancer at an early stage. So 93% of people who have cancer identified at the early stage, so before it's invaded through the wall of the large bowel, would be alive in 5 years. And unfortunately, if you're diagnosed with metastatic disease, so spread to other organs, then your survival is only about 7% at 5 years. Now, there are exceptions to this. So, for example, if you have a solitary secondary lesion in the liver or the lung, then your survival is considerably better, because that can be treated in isolation. Now, part of the drive to improve survival in the UK resulted in the rollout of the bowel cancer screening programme in 2006 for everyone in England. I know there are different screening programmes in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, but I'm going to focus on England just for simplicity. Everyone now between the age of 60 and 75 on 60th birthday and every 2 years is invited to take part in this programme by having a stool test every 2 years, and about 1 in 10 of these will be positive, and they will be then invited for a colonoscopy. I presume that most of you will have had a colonoscopy, but I'm going to go through it a little bit just in case you haven't, or you might clear up some ideas that you might have about colonoscopy. So in bowel cancer screening program context, of the 10% who have a positive stool test, 1 in 10 will have cancer, and 75% of these will be identified at early stage, so Dukes A, Dukes B, which means their survival is excellent. And a further 35% will have advanced precancerous polyps, which are polyps. Many polyps will never progress to cancer, but these polyps are high risk. And as you probably know, colonoscopy is a long, flexible tube which is inserted through the anal canal up to the rectum, right around to the end of the large bowel, maybe the beginning of the large bowel, maybe the end of the small bowel. And if we find a little polyp, then we will remove it. It's not the only screening method, of course, so you have these are the risk reductions with different types of screening methods. So if you take part in the bowel cancer screening program, then your risk of bowel cancer is reduced by 25%, and that's even if you have a strong genetic risk. So I would advise you to take part in that as well as undergo your standard lymph-related screening. But there are other kind of screening tests, so you can have a direct flexible sigmoidoscopy test, or in some countries they offer colonoscopy to people in their 50s, although there's nowhere in the world that can do this in an effective way because of resource issues. In the UK, the current bowel cancer screening program is being augmented by bowel scope, and people at 55 years of age will be offered this. And if they're 56, 57, up to 60, then they can request it. This is associated with a 43% reduction in colorectal cancer.
The battery's dead. I'll try and speak loudly. This feels a bit strange anyway. So, a 43% reduction in bowel cancer mortality. So this is going to be in addition to the current bowel cancer screening program. So one-off sigmoidoscopy, which is half a colonoscopy. Oh, I thought I could get rid of it.
Sorry.
Okay. Can everyone hear me now?
Yeah.
Is that okay at the back? Yeah. Shall we I'll just try with that for a minute, just because this feels strange. Okay. So the rollout for flexi screening. So it was envisaged in 2012 that this would be the pattern from close to nobody having it, just having a few pilot sites, to 100% by the end of 2016. And around the country, endoscopy units and gastroenterologists have been preparing for this by building new endoscopy suites, new endoscopy rooms, and training people to perform this test. So I think we won't be far off this rollout. And this is obviously for the average risk person. This is a little video just in case you haven't seen. Some of you might have looked it up on YouTube, but this is what colonoscopy and polypectomy would look like. This isn't me, by the way, just in case there's any confusion. Let's see if this works. Just pause for a second. Okay. Let me just try and see if I can play the video separate from this. Okay, it's happening. So this is what we call a pedunculated polyp, so it's a stalked polyp. It's a reasonable size, it's about 1 centimetre. A larger polyp, this is probably about 3 or 4 centimetres, potentially contains cancer. Get another polyp. So these are all examples of polyps. This is how we perform a polypectomy. So we take a snare, we run a current through it, we pass it through the scope, put it around the polyp head, down onto the stalk, and we burn through it. And fingers crossed, no burning. That creates bleeding or a hole in the bowel wall. The risk of that is up to about 1 in 100 with a polypectomy. This is a polypectomy of a larger polyp. This one is probably, I would guess, have what we call high-grade dysplasia, so very pre-cancerous, may even contain a focus of cancer within it. So very important that this is done well. The larger the polyp, the greater the risk. That's the other thing. Dropped it. Nurse? Bring me a drink. No. Only joking. Okay, let's skip this now. I think so they sort of go through this, through various other examples of this. So it's fine to drop it. What we need to do then is pick it up again and take it out and look at it under a microscope. So this is a little cartoon. This is the scope. Before we have a colonoscopy, because you know you have bowel preparation, of which there are various different types.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, bowel prep. But actually, it's very important, good bowel prep, as I'm sure you're aware, because when we put the camera in, you know, if it's covered in stool, then we might miss very subtle lesions that are particularly important in people with Lynch syndrome. These cameras are all made, well, they're made by Olympus and Pentax in large, so they're made by digital camera companies from Japan that produce, you know, they developed endoscopy in Japan in the 1970s. They're all high definition images. You can magnify the bowel. You may have seen it during your procedure, suddenly looking very large. Don't be surprised, that's just the camera. Okay. But the equipment, when I started endoscopy, was a fiber optic tube that you look through like this, and you know the images weren't great. So technology is improving, and so are the skills of colonoscopists. So bowel cancer screening colonoscopists are particularly skilled colonoscopists because they have to go through what's called a driving test before they can be bowel cancer screeners. At the end of the scope, you have a lens. You have an instrument port, so this is where the biopsy forceps or the snare comes out. This provides irrigation, so that you get some poo in the lens, then you can wash it off, and then you have light. Otherwise, you're just going into a dark black hole, and nobody wants that. So here we are. This is the biopsy forceps coming out at the end of the scope, placed with a pod. This looks like a nice juicy one, we would say, in a endoscopy room. Okay? So anyway, so what else can we do to improve survival apart from the bowel cancer screening program? Well, this is the crude colonoscopy rates per 1,000 in different countries. Wales, unfortunately, down near the bottom of the league table. Sorry, Tracy and others. Lowest in England and West Midlands. Sorry, guys, if you've come not far today. But England's still not doing very well. They do more. Oh, blimey! So they do more in Scotland, more in Poland, and more in Canada and Australia. And some people believe this is why the survival is better. It's entirely possible. So there's a move in the UK to offer straight-to-test colonoscopy for GPs, so they don't have to, patients don't have to be referred to clinic. They can just come straight for a colonoscopy, to shorten the patient pathway.
Walking centre.
Not quite like a walking centre. So there has to be some sort of streamlining of the pathway, but probably we need to assess the referrals before the patient comes. That's we'd rather do that than have to see them in clinic. And they have to be seen in clinic, and if their GP's worried they might have cancer for a good reason, then why should they wait an extra few weeks to be seen in clinic? So, and we're training all these new endoscopists around the country to perform flexible sigmoidoscopy in 55-year-olds. And I think that will have a very big impact on our survival, no doubt. And you know about the symptoms of bowel cancer, just in case they're not clear. A change in bowel habit from your normal bowel habit, and that's usually diarrhea, rarely constipation, bleeding, especially in older people. Younger people, possible, so you have to keep an open mind. Anemia, iron deficiency anemia, rather than other causes of anemia, so if you have low iron levels, if you're losing weight, or if you have a lump in your tummy, which are usually signs of kind of more advanced cancer, unfortunately. Obviously, if you have any of these symptoms, then you shouldn't sit in them literally and figuratively. Okay, so how do cancers grow in the large bowel? This was originally termed by a pathologist the adenoma carcinoma sequence, based at St. Mark's Hospital in Harrow. He identified this in the 60s and 70s. That basically cancers seem to come from polyps. That's it in essence. Now, in the colon, you have a fairly flat mucosa, not like in the small bowel where you have lots of fingers, which are called villi. Finger-like villi, sorry, not fingers, they're not real fingers. Villi, so the finger-like villi, they're called villi. In the bowel, it's flat, and the bowel mucosa is invaginated with crypts. At the base of the crypts, somewhere at the bottom, usually a couple on the right, a couple on the left, you have stem cells. Stem cells can become bone, they can become brain, they can become anything, any tissue, but they're under the influence of certain growth factors in the bowel, which means that they become colon cells. And they produce daughter cells which travel up the crypt, and they're replaced and replenished from below, from the niche, as it's called. This is how it looks under standard. When a pathologist cuts the sample, looks under a slide, this is how it looks, with the stem cells somewhere down here. And these are all crypts here. This is an artifact. These are crypts here. A single stem cell can dominate the crypt if you have an inherited mutation, for example, because it provides a growth advantage to that stem cell. So it dominates the other stem cells in the crypt. And then that crypt can divide by a process called crypt fission, which is just that crypt divides. So one stem cell takes over the crypt, that crypt then starts to dominate the other neighbouring crypts in the area. And this is how mutations spread in cancer, in the bowel. And this is why cancer is said to be clonal. It's obviously a little bit more complicated than this, but this is essentially how it happens. And if you look if you perform an endoscopy and you magnify it and you spray some blue dye spray, which we usually do now in Lynch patients, then in the background you can see normal mucosa with these little dots representing little crypts. And here we have the earliest form of polyp, which we call an aberrant crypt focus, and the crypts are enlarged. And there's a little collection of them here because one has grown, divided. Now these can come and go. They don't all progress to polyps, some of them will regress. For example, if the immune system helps to tackle these polyps. But some will progress to large polyps, and then unfortunately to cancer. This is large cancer, circumferential cancer as we call it. So it fills the inside of the bowel. And as this occurs, you have an accumulation of mutations. Now, there are different ways that these mutations can be accumulated, but essentially you accumulate a number of genetic changes. Some you're may be born with, but most, so some that you must, the starting one you might be born with. All of these are ones that you acquire over your lifetime due to exposure to carcinogens in the environment, for example. Some people, APC is a gene which is mutated in another condition called polyposis syndrome, but it's the most common initiating mutation in cancer in anybody. So when we think about what are these inherited risk factors for colorectal cancer, if you look at twin studies performed in Scandinavia and published about almost 15 years ago now, probably, it's estimated that about 35% of bowel cancer risk is due to genetic factors. Conditions such as Lynch syndrome and FAP polyposis contribute to a relatively small proportion of this risk. And there's a large amount of nebulous genetic risk which isn't fully characterized by now, it's fair to say. In fact, this is an oversimplification because this implies that 65% of people have cancer because of non-genetic causes and 35% because of genetic causes. In fact, everyone in this room has a unique genetic risk profile. So many of you may have Lynch syndrome, but different mutations within the Lynch syndrome genes will cause slightly different risk. Plus, that risk will be influenced by genetic influence from lots of other genes, good and bad influence. And it will be influenced by your lifestyle, how much you exercise, kind of diet that you eat, and whether or not you take aspirin.
Well said.
The gentleman will tell us all about it in a moment. So it's all modifiable. It might be better expressed as a sort of Venn diagram. So you have different kinds of genetic risk factors, and you have environmental and genetic risk, which are interacting to produce your unique genetic risk profile along with your unique environmental risk profile. Which would mean, what I mean by that is your lifestyle and things you're exposed to in the environment. Obviously, if you have Lynch syndrome, you almost certainly have one dominant risk factor, but that can be modified. In the UK, about 1 in 20 people will get bowel cancer. So that's a 5% average risk for everyone in the UK. Not everyone in the UK, but average risk for people in the UK. Almost 30% of people have a family history, either in a parent or grandparent, uncle or aunt. And for most of these people, the risk isn't all that different from the average risk. So the bowel cancer screening program that I mentioned is probably an adequate way to screen. We need to select those in order to help improve survival. We also need to select out those who will benefit from screening above and beyond the bowel cancer screening program, so people with Lynch syndrome, for example. And we stratify, these are the current guidelines, updated in 2010.